I'd like to address those white people who are, or consider themselves to be, non-racist, anti-racist, or pro-diversity, or all of the above. How many of you people actually live in diverse neighborhoods? By diverse neighborhoods, I don't mean neighborhoods with a couple token middle-class high yellow Oreo cookies. I'm talking about neighborhoods that are not at least 75% white. Those of you who actually do live in diverse neighborhoods, how many of you actually want to be there, or do you simply live there because you can't afford anything better? And of those of you who live in overwhelming white majority neighborhoods, for how many of you is it the most convenient option with regard to commuting? How many of you could live in a neighborhood a lot closer to work, but choose to live there because you don't like the neighborhood that's closer to work, even if you want to pretend that the reason you dislike that neighborhood has nothing to do with its diversity? I have actually lived in diverse neighborhoods when I was younger. I lived in west central Tucson in the John Spring neighborhood, which is between the West University Historical District in Barrio Anita. I lived there as a graduate student at the University of Arizona. And in the mid-1990s, when I was working a couple jobs in Austin, I lived in East Austin. Now, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble in these neighborhoods, but that's because I was large, young, male, and poor. I didn't look like an easy target, and I didn't have a lot that was worth taking. I didn't even have a car in those days. So it wasn't a big problem for me. Now my brother was a different case. He's been working for the past 13 or 14 years as a diesel mechanic at a company in southwestern Phoenix. And he owns his own home with his wife. And during that whole period, they haven't lived anywhere near his place of employment. At the start, they lived in a house in Mesa, and he commuted 20 miles each way. And he had an opportunity to move, he wanted to move, and he moved to a neighborhood in Gilbert, Arizona, which was even further away. He had to commute, and still has to commute, 25 miles each way. And I asked him, why don't you just move to southwestern Phoenix where you'll have a much shorter commute? And his answer was, you couldn't pay me enough to live in southwestern Phoenix. And of course, the ultimate reason why, though he didn't directly admit it, is that living in southwestern Phoenix would mean living with Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And this would mean having his house vandalized or burglarized, having his truck stolen, possibly having his wife assaulted or even raped or mugged, and having his kids terrorized at school or at play. Now, white people don't like paying a lot of money for gasoline. White people don't like spending a lot of time commuting. They have other things to do with their time. White people don't like paying high rents or high mortgages. But they are willing to do all of these things rather than put up with the direct consequences of diversity. For all that, my sister-in-law is teaching my nephews and niece to be anti-racist. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If diversity is causing economic hardship and a tremendous waste of gasoline in this country, which it clearly is, it doesn't make any sense for white people to continue to embrace it. White people need to get their heads out of the sand and start opposing diversity. Because you keep this up, it's not going to get any better for your children and your grandchildren. If anything, they'll have things worse than you do. We need to demand separation of the races and independence for European American people.